Hey guys, it's Mathel here once again, and today we have the video of the full endgame for the full Fizz to Ellie conversion, Ethereal Knives and Blade Vortex Inquisitor. This is the character that I showcased as a sort of starter build right from the get-go of Fall of Oriath Beta, though I have incorporated Ethereal Knives as a clear option for this character in a 4-link, which is a pseudo 6-link in a Tempest binding. So for our single target we do use Blade Vortex, and for clear we do use Ethereal Knives, though you can combine them, as you can see, in situations like this, like the tier 15 Beachhead, to get some pretty good combo damage of clear and single target. And as far as the single target is concerned, I'm about to blow your mind and tell you Blade Vortex is pretty good. It has always been pretty good. Recently it hasn't been too amazing because of a few nerfs here or there, but otherwise it's still really goddamn solid. This is the first time I've been taking Blade Vortex or this character to the end game, and it really has, I guess, surprised me. I expected it to be good. I didn't expect it to be quite this good. It has been probably one of my strongest damage dealing characters that I've made this league, and I've made a few fairly good damage dealing characters already. This is just pure brute force damage. There's no ignite, there's no poison like there used to be. It's just a bunch of elemental damage, and as it's on an Inquisitor, we do have full elemental penetration, so that's nothing to worry about in the nasty map mods and end game bosses like Guardians and Shaper. Overall, it was a very smooth experience in the end game. A few little hiccups on deaths here or there when we're talking some fairly serious map mods and all that, but you can see here on our first Guardian showcase of Chimera that the damage is very solid indeed, and the damage is basically your best defense. The offense is great defense, as they say. So in this case, we kill anything before it basically has any chance to do damage to us, and if it does, like the Chimera himself, then you simply leech through his damage with the Atziri Flask and some Warlord's Blasphemy. Now, Warlord's Blasphemy isn't that good because of the curse reduced effectiveness, but when you deal a lot of damage, it still does help a lot. That said, it's quite largely the Atziri Flask helping us leech as well. So the ads die instantly, Chimera dies pretty damn quick, and then you just jump around to the different phases. Over here, we do have a Hydra. Now, she's a little bit tricky just because she has to move around, and then you have to move around following her, but she dies insanely fast as long as you got your flasks up, and the only real issue with any of these Guardians is maintaining flasks. You pop all your flasks, you get all your stacks up, you stand next to them, then you reset flasks if you really want, and the damage kind of speaks for itself there. The Minotaur, for example, is probably the hardest of the Guardians for us if he's got some nasty map mods. Otherwise, flasks, face tank, wind up, and ultimately, I haven't been using the dual setup quite as much for my single target, whereas I should be, because when you stack up 20 times just before going in, you will have a good 3 or 4 seconds to then spam Ethereal Knives, and if you sub in slow approach, that means it'll do some pretty serious damage. On this example here, Phoenix, though, it really does show that you can use some additional Ethereal Knives for actual safety in the build. Since Blade Vortex has a small range, killing those Phoenix is kind of a nuisance, and using the Ethereal Knives really helps you without having to move too much. But yeah, that's neither here nor there. We're now up to Shaper, and well, you can do pretty much whatever you want here. I can tank one of those balls for damage if need be, but I try not to. You can tank the full Shaper beam with your flasks up as long as you have 20 stacks of Blade Vortex going, but it's still a good idea to move. I just sometimes don't because it's kind of more fun that way, watching yourself take all the damage in the world. And then of course the ads don't really exist, and you can keep spamming your Blade Vortex as long as you get some leech going from your Warlord's Mark. Otherwise, in my current situation, I can stack something like 16 to 18 times before running completely out of mana, so that's why you do need the Vial Clarity every now and again. And then Uber Atziri, well, the whole thing was pretty damn smooth. The only thing that had any real risk of killing me was the trio. As always, if you don't kill them fast enough, you might get wrecked by the ranged rain, and that did happen a few times, but for the most part, Uber Atziri was actually very smooth. The trash clear was very smooth, and trying to incorporate EK into the single target is what I was mentioning, and this is what I tried to do here. So wind up your stacks, dive in, and slow approach EK. So you kind of have two big single targets going off at the same time there, though the EK EK is nowhere near as big as the Blade Vortex, it does help if you completely want to go for optimized single target damage. Once again, over here we just stack up 20 stacks, dive in, and kill things instantly. This is Uber Itziri, and the damage is pretty damn good for it. At this stage though, my gear is fairly damn solid, and you couldn't upgrade too much, I don't think. Aside from swapping Herald of Ice for Hatred, at these actual boss fights, which I never did, Hatred would however be something like 20% more DPS to the build. I just never bothered doing that, because then you have to rely a lot more on Vile Clarity, and overall at my damage level that just sounds less comfortable. I'd rather have the unreserved mana and just have that little bit less damage at this point. Though if you're really trying to maximize, like I said, Hatred is definitely the way to go. So that's all for the end game things. I will show you a quick little wrap up as to the gear and all that. And here we are. So level 91 is what I got to. Started doing end game content around level 90, as I usually do. I try and get level 20 gems before I jump into it. And this time around, it was really damn smooth when I did. The gear, like I said, is fairly solid, and I did even upgrade my dagger a bit by, if you saw it in previous videos, by exalting it and getting the hybrid. So in the end, this dagger is something like 10 exalts. However, the damage it deals over a Doriani's Catalyst is almost nothing. It's just there for a bit faster attack speed and a bit more consistent crit, while also letting you whirling blades. So I am whirling blading as well because I wanted to free up my Quicksilver so I can get Taste of Hate in there, and I felt that's what I had to do because I still wanted to maintain a Silver Flask. Otherwise, Shield Charge feels better with the Quicksilver Flask, as well as that it means you can use the Doriani's Catalyst, but it's very similar in damage, so if you're just trying to get the starter base package, you're going for something like a Doriani's Catalyst. Like I said, the chest, not that important for Carcass Jack. This is all I've got for a 6-link to use for a build like this. However, something like a Covenant will probably be your max DPS setup, because if you have a 6-link Covenant, you get a bit of extra damage from the added chaos. You then wind up on your life instead of your mana, and that means you can reserve pretty much all of your mana for Hatred and then Blasphemy instead of Herald of Ice. Currently you can see I get 18 stacks, and then I regen a bit and I can get my last few stacks. And if you keep up Orbis Storm's Arcane Surge, then you do more or less get your 20 stacks happening without leeching. If you didn't have the mana like this and used Hatred, you wouldn't be able to do that, and that's where Covenant would probably come into play. And it makes the playstyle a bit more comfortable for no mana sort of worries, and you'll probably just have to pop your Eternal Life Flask before you dive into the content after you've stuck your 20 stacks up. Now, the other thing I mentioned in the previous video is you don't necessarily need a Tempest Binding. It is just a convenient form of additional damage for your Ethereal Knives. A starter helm like with 30% Blade Vortex duration and then crafting with a Horror or Insanity is probably going to be a better option, especially in the future. The damage gained from 50% Fizz to Extra Lightning or the 30% more Ellie is roughly the same as what you get from a Tempest Binding. The Tempest Binding, however, is just a nice static item to always have, and the Frenzies help you for your clear speed a bit. Whereas otherwise, this is going to be just as good and do just as much damage, and the Helm Enchant is a lot more flexible because you can buy one and start out crafting with that, whereas you specifically need a good Helm Enchant on Tempest Binding, which is going to be hard to get. And overall, the links that I ended up going with were EK, Fizz to Lightning, Spell Echo, and Slow Approach for single target, and then Chain for AoE. Play around with your different AoEs, maybe you want Pierce or Fast Approach, but this is what I liked the most. And then for my Blade Vortex, I went with Blade Vortex, Fizz to Lightning, Spell Echo, Conk Effect, Controlled Destruction, and lastly, Ellie Focus. Ellie Focus did end up being the biggest single target by far, but a lot of the time I'm running increased crit strikes so I can still freeze and shock. The only real time I'm swapping in Ellie Focus is purely the Guardians and Shaper himself. Otherwise, pretty much everything else increased crit strikes. Even on a few of the Guardians, crit strikes like Chimera is a better choice, I'd say. Whereas Ellie Focus, just there for pure single target. All of our sustain comes from Warlord's Mark, Blasphemy, as well as Itziri's Flask, so keep that in mind. Herald of Ice, just there for a bit of extra shatter. Feel free to use Hatred if you really need more damage. Orbis Storms, Power Charge on crit, Arcane Surge, and increased crit strikes is a setup for our Power Charges and Arcane Surge. Running Vile Clarity, Vile Haste, increased duration in the shield, and that's pretty much it. For maximum damage on rings, you need an opal with a Hysteria craft. That's as good as I could get. It's nothing too insane, but yep, just the Hysteria craft there is definitely the only real thing you can do for damage, besides just a bit of extra cast speed or a Scorn Essence to do some more damage. And then this amulet here is about as good as it's going to get for you, just trying to get crit multi, life, stats, spell damage, and cast speed. And then I exalted it for fizz damage, which basically does nothing. And in the end, I did drop my Intimidate belt so I can get life, reduce flask charges, and increase flask charge duration. Seemed like a stronger choice because it was a 300 life upgrade as well. And you can get more life as you see fit. I think about 5,500 plus is a good place to be. And Reflect does start to become a bit of an issue once you get to my level of DPS, because once you stack 20 Blade Vortex stacks, you can see how hard it starts to hit. Average damage of 70k almost. And so every hit's going to come back that fucking hard to you. And if you do have 20 stacks and you're hitting a big Reflect target like a tier 16, or a Harbinger or an Essence monster, you have a pretty good chance of one-shotting yourself. With EK, it's nowhere near that risky, but with Blade Vortex, it can happen, so you may find you got to start mapping with a Sibyl's Ring. Don't have one on hand because I didn't do that, but you may need to find you'll need the Sibyl's Ring because Yuggle passive is just not enough. And then lastly, I will show you the damage here. So with Slow Proj in our 4-link or 6-link Tempest Binding is 400k on EK, so it's nothing to sneeze at. But the main damage dealer we have is 1.1 million Blade Vortex. So that's what we're rocking with without the Hatred when I have my full 20 stacks. And that's pretty consistent. That's what you see is what you're going to get. You got to get your 20 stacks up, and then you're going to be rolling that 1.1 mil as soon as you press your flasks. If your flasks are down, your damage does go down pretty substantially, so we're talking no lucky crit either. We're talking half of our damage is coming from flasks. So bear in mind that when your flasks go down, your damage will go down a lot, as well as your sustain from its series promise, and they're pretty damn important. Though no flasks, damage is still pretty good. Let's not be too coy about it. 600k against Shaper is nothing too bad anyway. I'd say that's about all I got to say about the build though, guys. Hope you enjoyed watching this one. EK, I think, is a pretty fun option still. By itself, single target, it's not very impressive, so the Blade Vortex does fix that up and makes it a lot more playable and a lot more enjoyable than it otherwise would be. That's all I got for you guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.